Hello? How you doing?
Decides to cooperate with me.
Cat the animal or cat a piece of technology?
Cat the animal. We've got well, yeah. Now he's back here terrorizing me again. Where
Nice.
are you?
Based.
This-
Cats are chaos for sure.
Yep. I don't know if my video is working or not.
It's not working on Discord.
Okay. Let me see if I can fix that real quick. That was the thing I was afraid of.
Yeah, I don't know if your camera will stream to 2 locations at one time if you're live on OBS or if you're, I don't know what software programs you use, but basically I had to use a specifically designed software program in order to stream in 2 locations at one time, and it's called Split Cam. And so Split Cam allows me to have my camera live on a OBS while also being live on Discord.
I gotcha. All right. Let me switch it. See if that'll work.
Yeah, and then worst case scenario, you can do like a screen share program. And if oh yeah, there you go, perfect. Beautiful.
Yeah,
everybody can see your face.
I've actually got 3 separate cameras. I got one above me, one to the right of me, and then the DSLR I was trying to use before the cat decided to start terrorizing me.
Man, I'm looking at your setup and I'm getting fucking jealous. Are there what's to your back right, my back left?
My back right is the lore shelf / Joy Toy shelf /
okay
pin setup. And then
from here, I'm blind as fuck, so that looks like Titans to me. But hey, I like the Joy Toy guys as well.
There's a better view.
Nice. Yes.
But yeah,
yes.
let me.
It's all coming together.
Yeah. I've been doing this for probably. I got into Warhammer in like '99, and that was purely by chance. Back when Warhammer Fantasy was like at its peak, when I was younger. I don't know your exact age, so I can't. I'm
36.
Okay, so you're right up there with me. I'm 38. So, I didn't even start getting into 40K until they decided they wanted to kill fantasy.
Yeah.
And
well, it's still apparently it's still a bitter pill a decade later. I was literally talking to some people today and they're like, yeah, we play Age of Sigmar now, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, fantasy was pretty awesome back in the day. It's like, damn, if it got killed, you know, in 99, it's like people are still bitter about it 20 years later. That's insane.
yeah, you know, and I won't even fucking talk about Age of Sigmar. Don't even get me started on that shit. If you know, I went in there talking to one of those.
We can if you got complaints. So
I would rather not. I'm not trying to get canceled by Games Workshop over here by critiquing their product.
Well, let me kind of do like a little bit of an intro for the people at home. We'll just set a little bit of I have no like firm timeline. Typically, I just talk until the conversation kind of loses momentum. Normally run for like an hour to 90 minutes. And then I do have a birthday after we're done. So at around 11 p.m., let's say we talk for 2 hours uninterrupted perfectly. Not that we're going to do that, just if it happens. I have to leave at 11 p.m. because I promised a birthday boy that I would at least drop by and say hello.
Sure.
But just to introduce to the people at home as they're coming in, all that kind of stuff. So my name's Connor. Obviously, I run the YouTube channel Counterpoints. Oftentimes when I go live, it's a political subject. We're doing political debates, political reviews, all that kind of stuff. But tonight, we're actually going to just talk about Warhammer. So it's probably going to be a chiller stream. I want to share some of my love and insights into the game, maybe a little bit of history about how I got into it. You started the story of how you got into it. Sure. And do you want, I see Weezypillar, and Pillar is spelled Pillar. You also have a YouTube channel. So can you introduce yourself to the folks at home, what you're all about, what your channel's about, anything else that you want them to know about you before we get started?
Sure. So, I originally started out as a gaming channel, basically doing tutorials on how to use Cheat Engine. And that's where the bulk of my subscribers came from, which, I mean, I'm obviously a hell of a lot smaller than you. I've only got like 1.7, but I really don't do that much outside of tutorials. And of course, I've gotten older. I have less time to play video games, so I've been trying to branch out into more diverse subjects. You know, occasionally I'll talk about politics. Occasionally I'll talk about Warhammer. You know, even when I do decide to upload something, I mean, it could be like a month or two in between. It's just, I'm an IT manager, so my time is very limited. You know, this isn't a full-time gig for me as much as that would be nice, but.
Yeah, this is something that I kind of wouldn't mind sharing with the audience anyways, just kind of talking about where we're at. You know, 50K subs is nice, and then I feel like I found like a formula and a niche and something that people appreciate and all that kind of stuff. So I'm very happy and very fortunate in the niche that I found. But it's not, if you were like a single person, I'll just be direct. I've made $2,000 a month off of ad revenue for like the past 6 months, which by the way is fantastic. I'm not complaining, but living off of $24,000 a year, you know, with 2 kids and a mortgage would not be possible. So if you're like a 19-year-old and you're YouTubing and you actually get good numbers and all that kind of stuff, yeah, you can make money. But what I've heard consistently is like you have to hit around 100,000 subs and have an active audience in order to really go full time. If you're talking about those dudes who they pay their bills, they have a family, they have nice cars, all that kind of stuff, and it's a grind. So to kind of wrap up this tangent, I've been working, I'm a wage cage person as well. I work 40 hours a week, and then I get another 5 hours or 10 hours of editing, research, and, you know, shoot time in order to get a product out as close to weekly as I can. And I've been doing that for 4 years. So that's just to show you how long it takes to get where you need to be and how consistent you need to be.
Oh yeah. And you know, I do this for fun. You know, if I think of something interesting, I'll make a video. If I see an issue that somewhat piques my interest, then I'll make a video. You know, it's not as constant as it was back before I became a manager. Back when I actually had free time. You know, I was actually uploading more back then. Now it's like, maybe.
Yeah, well, and that's my other thing too. It's like, as far as ideas for content, I always have like endless ideas, and then I start a script and I'm like 3/4 of the way through, then I get interrupted and I start another idea halfway, and then all that kind of stuff. And so yeah, it gets very distracting. But yeah, you were kind of telling me about, or telling us about how you got into Warhammer in the first place. So how you're mentioning back in 99, that was kind of like your introduction. So I know the way that I got into it because I can tell you vividly because I still remember how much of an impact it had on me. What was kind of your introductory moment?
Well, like I said, it was by chance. I'm going to say this. It was many, 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 many years before I even bought my first mini.
Yeah.
So all of my stuff was lore. Just books. Nothing but books. And there's something about Black Library books that seem to grab you. And like I said, once fantasy bit the dust, it was kind of left with, well, what am I going to do to fill this hole of, Gotrek and Felix and Malice Darkblade, all these main characters that they had built up, and now all of a sudden everything's gone. It's like, well, what do you do? And I was like, well, I had bought Space Marine on 360 before I even knew what 40K was. And after that, it was like, oh, well, there's books for 40K. Well, what's the first book that I should read? Everybody's like, well, obviously you want to read Horus Rising, which, first book in the Horus Heresy. And then after that, it was done. It was over. Next thing I knew, I was broke. I was living under a bridge, but I still had my lore collection. Nobody can say that this hobby is cheap.
No, it's practically a drug addiction. But the good news is that it actually doesn't harm your body the way a drug addiction does. It gives you hours to focus on hobbying, which is time that you could spend doing drugs. And then also it requires like some skill and some management and logistics and painting talent and all that kind of stuff. And then it always pushes you to be better and better because there's no bottom to Warhammer. You can stay just with the lore. You can stay with the hobby. You can stay with the tabletop. You can go with the games. You can go with the animations. But the truth is that there's no real end to Warhammer, which is part of what it's very appealing to me. It's like it's a whole, the same way that some people have mentioned that the original Star Wars, the reason why people fell in love with it is because it was a lived-in universe. So all the droids and set pieces and all that kind of stuff were like grimy, and it looked like this was people's daily lives. That's the way Warhammer is, where it's like this is a coherent universe with people who live in it every single day, and you're just getting this tiny slice of a tiny fraction of a tiny piece of time that is phenomenal. And that's part of what I love about it for sure.
Well, that whole grimdark element of, everything's trying to fucking kill you. These guys are probably going to end up dead, but you still want them to live. You're rooting
for them. Gaunt's Ghost. Yeah.
That's my biggest argument, where you hear all these people, like on Sig Marxism and subreddits like that, how they're talking about, well, the Imperium are the bad guys. And I can't think of a single book out of 40K that I've ever read where I've sat there and gone, they kind of did what they had to do. It's the good guys, and oftentimes the good guys don't win.
Yes.
That's just how it is. I'd say that runs parallel to life.
Well, and that was that's part of the reason why I fell in love with it. So just to kind of give you my introduction for how I got into it, the first thing that I did was I went to the library, and in the library there's just random assortments of books, and there was a couple of books that I was reading over and over and over again. One of them was Frank Miller's 300, so like the Spartan battle that inspired the film. This was before the film came out. This was probably in like 2000, 2001, somewhere in there. And then I saw I want to say it's like the 3rd edition or 4th edition codex for the assassins. And so it was an Eversor assassin pointing his pistol at you, the reader, with like a claw behind him, like as he's about to come in and slash your face off. And I was like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
And so like I open it up and I start reading it, and they're talking about temples, and they're talking about assassins, and they're talking about the God Emperor, and like you have like an assassin that can't be perceived by psychic beings and drains their energy, and you have a long range sniper who's like a silent killer, and you have a lithe, beautiful assassin gymnastics girl, but she can shapeshift and body morph into any person in the galaxy. And then finally you have the Eversor, which is a giant berserker drug induced monster who runs into a crowd of dozens of enemies, slaughters all of them, and takes out the target. And then if he lives, he gets extracted and then put into a stasis field so he can go do it again. And if he doesn't live, then he explodes and kills everybody in the building. And I was like, this is some of the coolest shit I've ever read in my entire life. Yep. Please tell me more.
Yeah, the Eversor is the embodiment of, I want that thing to die. Well, what thing? Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so from there it was over. I didn't start with the Horus Heresy series. I started with Gaunt's Ghost. And that was another thing. I have to say, Dan Abnett is, for me, he's one of the best authors I've read ever. Like I'm not trying to blow smoke up people's ass or whatever, but obviously there's people like Tolkien or Lewis, and these are like the giants of history where they've told these like broad stories that have affected, millions of people, with like the Chronicles of Narnia and the Lord of the Rings. And for me, I love Dan Abnett more. Like I connect with his stories. I connect with his characters. I think he's a phenomenal storyteller. I think he's great at giving descriptions. I think he's great at world building. And I think he's great at making you care about people and then killing those people off in some of the most like rewarding, but also deeply tragic ways.
Yep. I have to agree. Honestly, I can't think of a single Black Library author right now that I dislike. It's, the quality of writing that they've been putting out for the last few years has been just fantastic. The same thing with the Siege of Terra series that's out right now, the ending of the Horus Heresy, and all of it has been great. And it's one of these things where it's like, it's coming to an end, but you just want them to keep going, after...
And it hurts anyways.
Yeah. 54 books in the Horus Heresy, and now they're finally deciding, all right, we're done. It's like, shit, give me 54 more and I'll be fine.
Well, give me 54 on the Scouring. How about that?
Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's the next direction that they go in at the end of the Siege of Terra series.
But when you're talking about 10,000 years of history, and you're also talking about like different epochs being lost and different chapters existing and being lost and different factions and all that kind of stuff, the universe is endless, which is part of what I love about it. And that's a funny thing about, Gaunt's Ghost, which is one of Dan Abnett's series, is it's about an Imperial Guard regiment that gets raised, and their planet is lost as they're being raised. So these warriors already knew that they were going off planet. They were fighting for the Imperial Guard. There's a high chance they're never coming home. They're probably never going to see their family again, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there was always like the hope of going home, and also the love of their home world that they were going to carry with them always. And so they're robbed of that because their political leader, he's a colonel commissar, so he's like a battlefield leader and like an enforcer of morale. He decides that I can stay on this planet and fight the forces of chaos and die, because this is like a full-fledged invasion and we're not going to win. Or I can salvage the regiment that is already half evacuated and then take them onto other battlefields and have them fight in battles that might mean something. And he chooses to salvage half of the unit. And I'll try to wrap it up because I could literally just walk through the entire chronology. But there's always this underlying tension, even with characters that respect the Colonel Commissar Ibram Gaunt. There's always this tension of, you robbed me of the ability to defend and die with my homeworld. and half of the regiment fucking hates him and half of the regiment loves him because he saved them from that fate, but then they also have like an underlying bubbling resentment. And so it's this like almost like Odyssey style tale of a band of warriors trying to figure out how to survive and also how to figure out how to have a life and a purpose after everything they've ever known has been robbed from them. And it's a dark, beautiful, and deep and sad story series.
You know, I'm gonna counter that with my favorite bad guy, Fabius Bile.
Yeah,
Fabius Bile. The series for him, I think it's Clone Lord, Manflayer, Gene Father, all of those. The whole thing was that Fabius wanted to create this perfect being. And he just can't really do it. Not up to his standards. And of course, everybody else, you know, I think in one of them, he ends up cloning Fulgrim back to life.
Yeah.
And it actually ends up being a better version of Fulgrim than the actual Fulgrim, which just pisses him off. And he ends up killing him, or no, he gives him away to, what's his name? The collector. Was it Trazyn?
Trazyn the Infinite.
Trazyn, yeah. He ends up giving him to him, like, here, you can have him.
Wow.
But, you know, it's...
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, so the Emperor's Children, they're the Space Marine Legion that's sworn to Slaanesh, which is like the god/goddess of excess. But Fabius Bile is the chief apothecary of that legion, who was the first one to really start experimenting on Space Marines that kind of put the Emperor's Children on the path to corruption and damnation.
He created the Noise Marines.
Yeah, so he's kind of like a mad scientist character, which I just got done. You know, we're going to jump all over the place. But Illuminor Saris was the antagonist in the Pariah Nexus series, the animated series that just came out for the past 3 episodes. And I absolutely love him as a fucking character. I thought they did a great job because you have a robot, you have a spider robot, and you can tell that he's arrogant. You can tell that he's intelligent. You can tell that he doesn't care for the suffering of living beings. You can tell that he views himself as better than any of his Necron peers, and he's dismissive and callous to the suffering of his own species. I love everything they did with that character. It was great.
Yeah, I think they kind of shoehorned her. I'm trying to think of the correct verbiage here on the death mark that he unleashes.
Yeah. He got screwed.
Yeah, but you know, in lore,
narratively,
yeah. You know, in lore, the Death Mark are supposed to be these uber badass assassin robots, and of course, in the series, he gets grabbed by a zombie Kriegsman, and they end up tearing him apart. It's kind of like, I'm pretty sure he would have nuked that entire zombie army that was in front of him, you know. But
in his defense, which I do love, I think there's some narrative defense here. I agree with you that a death mark should be able to take on 12 zombified guardsmen and basically liquefy them instantaneously. And even if he gets like cornered and they're all ripping at his components and try to rip out his coils and all that kind of stuff, he should basically, like, as a metal robot warrior, he should be able to do some kung fu and just, like, you know, karate chop them all to death near instantaneously. However, I do think that in the narrative's defense, they did establish him as like a ruthless and intelligent badass, particularly in episode 1. Like, he took out those guardsmen like it was fucking nothing. Just like melted them, hunted them down, made them look stupid, you know, cornered them and teleported behind them. It was fantastic. If you haven't checked out the Pariah Nexus series, you need to.
I mean,
and
same.
Also,
sorry, go ahead. No, I was gonna say same thing with the. I think it's either before or after the Ultramarine Sergeant that he just levels.
Well, and by the way, the Ultramarine Sergeant in a lot of ways did things like by the book. Like he's approaching a target threat area. There's multiple vectors of threat. He kind of analyzes one that's a little bit off. He sees a shot coming his way, or he already stepped to cover before that, but he steps to cover in order to avoid the shot. He steps back out. He puts bolt rounds into the threat direction. He's scanning for more, you know, potential threats. He realizes that the dude's teleported behind him. He misses him by a chainsword by, like, you know, just a few feet. feet. And by the way, like for me, that's the exact way a Space Marine is going to react. You have like a dude who's trying to shoot you with a sniper weapon from 50 yards. And the Space Marine instinct is not only am I going to shoot at you, I'm going to try to charge you and kill you with a sword. So the Ultramarine Sergeant was like brilliant from my end. And then the only reason why he's thwarted at the last moment is because the Death Mark is able to teleport. And it was basically, I don't want to say it was a ruse, but it was relatively speaking like a way for the Death Mark to set up a better shot. So the Death Mark sets up a better shot and takes him out. He still fights as he dies to bring his bolt pistol around, and then he gets domed. And like, so you can say like, well, Space Marines are supposed to be XYZ ABC better, or you can say that the Death Mark would have been more intelligent and just teleported in a place that the Ultramarine Sergeant would have never noticed. But that's not fun to watch. Like, it's not fun to watch perfect characters. It's more fun to watch lore sensitive characters who act in the ways that you would hope that they would when put in dangerous situations.
Yeah, and I think they got the heavy feeling of the fact that these guys are wearing, you know, super heavy power armor, but they're still moving faster than a normal human being to, you know, in a combat situation. I think they did a really good job of
1,000 pounds.
Yeah.
They feel like they're 1,000 pounds and insanely fast. And I think the moment that really illustrated that to me was, I felt like the walking scene, sometimes the walking was a bit slow, like the Salamander Sergeant or whatever, when he's in the or not Sergeant, he's just a brother. I messed that up in my review. But the Salamander, Zakan, when he's walking out of the Thunderbird or Thunderhawk, excuse me, after he jacked up all those zombies, he's kind of walking slow. And I'm like, I feel like you're padding the runtime a little bit here. But then he does like a quick draw with a hand flamer and sets the last zombie on fire. And I was like, that is like a trained impulse. Like if you were watching like a shooter on a gun channel on YouTube, that would be the guy who practiced 10,000 times. So, you know, so on one hand, and then also when he responded to the shot in the second episode, when the Death Mark was trying to take him out, that speed was perfect. I felt like they nailed it.
Yeah, that whole series, all 3 episodes, was... I remember watching it, each one as they came out, and I was like, if Games Workshop can keep putting out this quality, then they've got a product. You know, it was kind of hit and miss with some of the stuff they were putting out, and it seems they've just, like, upped the ante on the quality with that. Even Angels of Death, even that series was fantastic. And it all goes back, and I know people are going to say lore doesn't matter, but the fact that they are committing to the traits and everything else that everybody loves about 40K, you know, they know what their product is. They're keeping it consistent. I mean, that whole scene, jumping back to Pariah, the scene with the when Sakan is walking and he's kind of recreating the whole battlefield, like whenever they were actually fighting against the Necron invasion. And it kind of cuts over to that scene of the Sisters of Battle. And they're all, you know, of course, one's screaming there, you know, for the Emperor and suffer not the alien to live. And it was like, I got goosebumps because I was like, okay, see this? This is what people want. This is what we need. We need more of this.
Absolutely. And the only, I don't have a problem. I just want to bring up some challenges, because I actually talked to, when I was doing the reviews, because I started just doing like pretty haphazard reacts. I'm actually going to go back and redo some of them. But I would just watch the episode. I would pause intermittently, interject lore, and then, you know, keep playing the episode. I would get some of the lore wrong. I would go off on weird tangents, but it was still a blast for me. And it was a blast for enough people that here we are, you know, 50,000 subs later. But the thing that I know about animation, a animator from Hammer and Bolter reached out to me, and they basically said that they had huge expectations from Games Workshop had huge expectations about what they wanted to put on screen. They gave them a limited time frame and a limited budget. They tried to work with the parameters as much as possible, But the truth was that you could go back and look at which I think this is one of the best Hammer and Bolter episodes narratively, is the Eldar episode, where I think it's the Garden of Ghosts, where the Ultramarines destroy Craftworld, which doesn't make sense, by the way. But Primaris Ultramarines destroy Craftworld, and it shows like how xenocidal the Imperium is, and it shows how protective of their people the Eldar are, and it shows like the humanity of this guy who's looking for his mom. Basically, he's looking for his dead mom on the Craftworld. And but if you look at all the assets that are on screen, you have Howling Banshees, you have Striking Scorpions, you have Primaris Ultramarines, you have Redemptor Dreadnoughts, you have an Avatar of Cain, you have, Exarchs, you have, I think you even have like Swooping Scorpion or Swooping Hawks. You have a, whatever the las cannon repulsor is, the repulsor executioner or something like that. Yeah, the repulsor executioner. So it's like the heavy tank with like the main laser gun or whatever. And so what they did is they put too many assets on the screen, and they didn't dedicate enough time and energy to animating each and every single one. So what happens is you have a bunch of beautifully drawn things, but they're like floating on the screen like it's a PowerPoint presentation. And it just doesn't look or feel right. And so I don't blame the animators for that. I think Games Workshop gave them too many things to do and not enough time or money to do it.
Well, it kind of goes back to when Games Workshop was scooping up all the independents on YouTube, which
I'm still bitter about it.
Yeah, I'm sure most people are. It comes up every now and again. I feel like if they had just let those people continue the path that they were already on, then we would be where we are now at the beginning.
Yeah, maybe a year
same thing.
ago, yeah.
Same thing with the Astartes. Who was the other guy that was really big? Sodaz, I think, was another one.
Sodaz, absolutely nothing. Yeah, these guys were phenomenal.
And, it was just kind of funny that we had quality like that had already existed on YouTube. And then people kind of saw the first episode of Hammer and Bolter and were going, oh, what the hell are they doing with these guys? They just pay them off to just, fuck off over there. We don't want to see you. We don't want you touching our stuff. We're going to do this, and,
wildly frustrating. I was still thinking about, so I think that put a bitter pill in a lot of people's mouths. I've talked to Absolutely Nothing, who did a Deathcore of Creed series. I have not talked to Sodaz. I tried reaching out to him. He didn't respond to any of my personal outreach. And then Siame Peterson, the guy who created Astartes, I'm assuming he's in a basement somewhere, and Games Workshop is, they chained him there, and they're pointing a pistol at his head. And I can't decide if they paid him a lot of money for Astartes, and then had him sign a non-disclosure agreement, and then they had a bitter relationship on working on Astartes 2, so he quit and walked away, or if he's been working on Astartes 2 the entire time, but because they wanted it to be so ambitious because Astartes 1 was so good that they literally don't want to show anything until they have something like a really big thing to show.
Yeah.
And I'm really wondering what 2024 is going to look like. And I think that almost in every animation that's been released for the past year, I've seen people in the comments section being asked, like, where's Astartes 2? And Games Workshop doesn't reply to those comments. And so that's been wildly frustrating. But I've thought about doing this myself, because the Games Workshop community team and legal team reached out to me because they didn't want me to be reacting as hardcore to their content as I have. And I borderline want to reach out to them and be like, listen, can we come to some kind of agreement with Sodaz and Absolutely Nothing where they keep 100% of their revenue, but they have to send Warhammer 40K products to you first for like intellectual property approval? Because Sodaz in particular, he's been releasing Fallout content and Halo content and Titanfall content that has blown my fucking tits off. And I understand that the animation software that he's using isn't the highest fidelity graphics, but the choreography that he does is fantastic.
Well, he does a good job. You can tell it's something that he enjoys. I think the first thing that got me hooked from him was the Iron Warriors versus the Imperial Fists little short that he did. That was just so dirty. He did.
It was.
You know, you had the iron. Go ahead.
No, sorry. Go ahead.
No. I'll let you fanboy out first.
No, I was just going to say my only beef with it is the Thunderhawk crashing into the wall and coming to a dead stop, because I was like, I don't care if you're a fucking Space Marine. That's going to fuck you up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Besides that, frame by frame, start to finish, it's some of the best shit I've ever seen, because the Iron Warriors, they're tactical, they're methodical, they're flanking, they're just smoking the Imperial Guard, doing them dirty left, right, and center. And then the Imperial Fist, they're defensive. They got the shield wall. The captain with the heavy Thunderhammer charges forward and takes on a dreadnought. The lone Imperial Guardsman who has a las cannon, who had all his boys killed around him. He gets up and he gets off that one shot on the dreadnought before he gets smoked. That way the heavy Thunderhammer captain can get in there, and the heavy Thunderhammer captain does his work, but then he gets taken out at the end. And it's also some Skitarii can run away with some like STC documents or something. But like, dude, like frame by frame, there was not a moment. The first time, the second time, maybe even the third time I watched it, there was not a moment that I wasn't enthralled by everything I was seeing on screen. And it's hard to buy that kind of emotion. Yeah.
You even got that one part where the Fist gets his arm blown off and he's still sitting there just shooting away. You're like, holy shit.
Oh, I'm looking in like for me, like that's such a fanboy moment, because you've been reading about these like 8 foot, 9 foot tall, genetically engineered freaks of nature who like they can feel pain, but they're pretty much like immune to pain, relatively speaking. And they're psycho indoctrinated to be the world's most fierce warriors. And this dude loses an arm and he's one-handing a bolter into the oncoming Iron Warriors. And it's like I think the communication is you've taken something that I've read in a factual manner and you've demonstrated it in an emotional and action scene that's visceral and exciting. And I think you have to be really talented to do that. Oh yeah,
and of course there was the other one that he did with the Kriegsmen, and that. You got the
frame by frame.
You got the whole Krieg cavalry charge. You got a World Eater berserker busting through a door. You know, he did a really good job. Not
only that. The thing that I love, because I'm a former veteran. I was not former veteran. I'm a veteran. But I did 4 years in the Marine Corps and I did 4 years in law enforcement. So like I know different things about like physiology or squad tactics or how people conduct themselves or whatever. And absolutely nothing who did another Death Corps of Krieg video where the Death Corps, they charge across a open field, they get into the trenches and they clear out the trenches and they're fighting chaos cultists. He's like a military tactical nerd. Everything he did was like by the book. I was like, this was borderline done by a veteran. This is how good and realistic all this stuff is. Soda's not as much, but enough. And he introduces really cool concepts that I have asked myself about 40K. So and are also kind of mentioned in the lore. The Ultramarines, I think they had something called Praetorians, who were people who were like trained as diplomats to stay on like different worlds in Macragge and also conquered worlds or whatever. And they were there to help with governance. So like, yeah, they were warriors and they would lead from the front and all that kind of stuff, but they also dealt with like diplomacy. And so when I saw 2 Dark Angels with a company of guardsmen and a Leman Russ going into, enemy territory, I was like, why don't they do combined arms more often? Because like the tanks and the guard and the Space Marines, they can all make each other more deadly. And that's what you saw with the Dark Angel and the guardsmen operating together at the end. Is the Dark Angel was able to take all the hard points when the guardsmen were being suppressed by heavy weapons, and the guard were able to distract and clear all the threats that the Space Marine couldn't track at one time. It was fantastic.
Yeah. And that I do like that little nod that they kind of give from the I'm not a veteran. I don't know what you would call him, the tank guy. The guy that was in the tank that originally sees the Death Corps at the beginning, and he kind of looks at them like, what the hell? That can't be good. And at the end, he kind of sees the same one again. Maybe I don't know. They all look the same. It sort of gives them that look like, well, shit, yeah, you know.
Yeah, he just watched his entire company get wiped out by a bunch of Chaos Renegades, and it took a bunch of 16-year-old bioengineered fucking weirdos and gas
shovels
on a horse. Yeah, with horses and shovels and artillery fucking charging in. And then like another beautiful detail, this is where I know that love was put into it. The artillery was firing into the positions that the Death Corps and the Dark Angel were taking.
Yeah, they just jumped in.
So there was just as much of a chance that the artillery would have hit the Death Corps, but the Death Corps are suicidally brave, so they didn't give a shit. So they just ran into the trench of a bunch of cultists who were like, no, I don't want to get obliterated by artillery. And then by the time they look back up, there's Death Corps in their midst, bayoneting them to death and las-gunning them to death. It was fantastic. What a great love series. And like, this is what pisses me off. I don't feel like this should be me saying this. This should be a Games Workshop representative saying this, being like, oh my God, I can't believe people love our intellectual property so much that they've put in so much time and love and attention to detail.
Well, I have my own thoughts and feelings on how Games Workshop handles their IP. And I'm going to segue here. So The End in the Death Volume 2 for the Siege of Terror, the most recent Siege of Terror book, just came out on Saturday. And what we got was a barely functioning website and about 80 copies last time I checked, sitting on eBay for about $400 a piece.
Yeah.
But this has been an ongoing thing for collectors, especially for book collectors at this point. It happened during the last End in the Death release for Volume 1. And there were so many pissed off collectors that were emailing Games Workshop that were, making videos about it. I think even Luton made a video about it.
What the fuck?
Yeah, at the end of the day, Games Workshop is there to make money. Plain and simple, Yeah. And if that means protecting their IP like a rabid mongoose, then that's what they're going to do. And at the same time, there's going to be they don't give a shit who buys the books. The fact is they sold them. Does it matter if it's going to somebody, in the UK that's going to flip it for 3 times what it's worth? They don't care. I actually got lucky. Because as you said, there are Games Workshop employees that do care. The last time that it happened, I had a lady from marketing for North America reach out to me because I guess she saw my order history and was like, yo, this guy's mad. We probably need to help him. But she did everything humanly possible to get me a copy and had it shipped to my local store for me. Because I sent her pictures. I was like, look, you got all these people that missed out. You've got, 50 plus copies on eBay that nobody's going to be able to afford, especially right now. And you've got copies sitting at Warhammer World just waiting to be bought, but you canceled everybody's orders. She's like, you know what? I'm going to take care of it. We're going to try and squash this. And I think that was right around the time the Games Workshop was like, all right, we're going to try and fix the website to put a lid on the scalping and botting problem. But,
Nah, see, so here's my thing. I think Games Workshop knows that part of their appeal is they made a killer IP, right? Like, because what you have is, a lot of people have pointed this out. I'm not going to be the first or last to point this out, but you have the bones of a lot of what made Dune really good, which, by the way, I haven't read the original Dune because I love 40K so much. I don't want to ruin Dune. But I watched the movie. And so, God Emperor, tribal warfare, a lot of the warp magic is taken from that. And then you also have like Dread with the Adeptus Arbites, Judge Dredd. You have the Imperial Guard. You have a lot of inspiration from World War I and World War II real history. When it comes to Space Marines, you have like Starship Troopers. When you have, so you can just name, and a lot of the stuff is like Lord of the Rings, because you basically have fantasy races in space. That's really what it is. So it's like Dune, Lord of the Rings, Starship Troopers, Dread, and then anything else that you can think of. Like the Interrogator series was effectively like a neo-noir. So it was like a detective series from the 1920s and 30s, but they just rewrote it for the 40K universe. You can take any style of narrative, and it will fit into the 40K universe. And so that is the power of their IP, is that you can just take a concept, samurai, cowboys, bounty hunters, whatever, it'll fit in the 40K universe. So they know they have that power. So as a result, they have to limit access to that IP to make it valuable. And that's why they do the stupid, by the way, stupid shit. Like, you have to have 100% GW plastic in all your kits in order to participate in a tournament.
Yep.
There are so many people who kit bash or third-party print like little bits. I would say like 80% has to be GW or some shit like that. Because but all of my models right here, half of them are illegal by GW standards, because I bought helmets and shoulder pads from third-party bits manufacturers who make custom bits for models. And now I can never compete in a tournament. Now, do I want to compete in a tournament? It's not really too much skin off of my ass, but at the same time, you're pushing customers away. But I think they know that there's people like me who are so addicted to the IP that will work around their bullshit and still give them hundreds, if not thousands of dollars.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah. I was wondering when we were going to segue into the dreaded argument that
the female space marines,
the female space marine are. Yeah, let's rip this Band-Aid off and talk about that.
I borderline want to make like a dedicated video, but I'm actually I'm legitimately worried about making a dedicated video and just having all the lefties just come into the comments and the fucking likes and dislikes and all that bullshit and just bomb it. But I do have my opinions and I'm quite passionate about them. So if you want to start, you're more than welcome to.
Sure. So I've been in the camp of, if Games Workshop were ever to decide to go in that direction, and they somehow made it work after stating for 20 plus years that it can't be done, if they made it with a well thought out plan of, okay, this is how this works, here's the backstory, we're gonna go into detail, then I'll be okay. It's kind of sketchy, but all right, I guess this is where we're going with it. I'm not gonna start burning my figures and my books and everything else just because there's female models. I mean, we already have female models. We got Sisters of Battle. We have female guardswomen. Sorry, Sisters of Silence. You could arguably even say Mechanicum if you want to go that route. If you want to go the non-binary route, you got Mechanicum all day long.
You could go non-binary transhumanist.
You can be whatever you want.
Pronouns and its pronouns work perfectly fine with the Mechanicum.
Yeah,
Get the fuck out of here.
There was a whole argument, I think, because somebody said, "Oh, well, in one of the books for the Mechanicus, they were going by its pronouns." I was like, "No, that's about right. I can't really argue with that."
80% robot. I'm okay with that. That makes sense to me. And dude, that was one of the things that pissed me off too, because I'm not a particularly woke person, but I was kind of I was jokingly referring to the Mechanicus character in the Hammer and Bolter episode. I was referring to them by they them pronouns or whatever the fuck, and they were like, "You can't do that. Don't let all your woke shit do it." And I was like, you're retarded. 40,000 years into the future, this is a transhuman cultist who has been 80% replaced by robotic parts. Even by your standards, you shouldn't be referring to human females and human males by they, them pronouns.
Yep.
But very clearly, this would be an exception that might actually work. So don't get your, as much as progressives are getting their panties in a fucking twist about some things, don't get your fucking panties in a twist over a fucking robot being called its or they, them. Don't fucking get it twisted.
Yeah, that's probably not the hill to die on there.
No, don't give a flying fuck about that.
But talking about Games Workshop and their IP, it's they know that as much as these people that are screaming in the positive for them want to say that they're in the majority, most people either A, don't give a shit, or B, don't want them. Yes. And I have a pretty sure feeling that Games Workshop knows their audience. And
I hope so, man. I hope so. And I'll sorry, go ahead.
What we don't want is this shoehorning of, okay, well, now they exist. Now they're there. Right. It's well, what the fuck? Where'd they come from? How'd they get here?
let me tell you what I'll reject, and let me tell you things that I think they could do that I would be okay with. Okay. Sure. So let me tell you what I'll reject. I will reject female Space Marines being there since the beginning. Somebody said that shit, and I was like, that is stupid as fuck. Yep. Like, we literally have, like, we have asexual demigods of war roll into battle. Everybody's a dude. And we have that written for like 30 fucking years. I think that like Games Workshop, I think Warhammer was like created in 1987. So going on 40 plus years, like I know during like first and second edition, when it was like Rogue Trader, this was like pre-Warhammer, they created female models for the Space Marine sets and they didn't do well. So they didn't continue to include them. And then they developed the Space Marine lore where they made them transhuman and biologically engineered and all that kind of shit. I don't know when that exactly came into place, but I think it was like third edition was when like a lot of the stuff got codified. And so now we have the Sisters of Silence, who are the female power armored faction. If you want a woman in power armor to squeeze your head between her thighs, you have an entire faction. Just go there, right? So them going back into the past in order to do it doesn't make any kind of fucking sense for me whatsoever. To never have it mentioned that there were female Space Marines since the beginning is stupid as fuck. So I want to throw that out the window. Let's just throw that out the window. Now, Chaos. If Fabius Bile wants to make female Space Marines, I'm okay with that. And the reason why is because he took Xenotech and grafted it onto Space Marines. You have the Demonculaba with the Iron Warriors, with them, like, you know, birthing new Space Marines out of like demon hosts all stitched together. You have warp fuckery. You have Tzeentch turning people into weird feather demons and all that kind of shit. Female Chaos Space Marines, a la Fabius Bile, I could almost buy. And then, sorry, I have more theories, but I want to let you chomp down on that one.
So here's the thing, and this is going to make the quote-unquote wokies very mad, is that Fabius Bile already tried that, right?
Interesting.
So in, I think it's Clone Lord, the third book in his series, they're introduced in the beginning, where he was basically trying to create the perfect human. Mm-hmm. And even in that book, the first one that he makes is a female, a woman. Mm. But they even make a point that she's too perfect, to the point where she looks almost unnatural because she's, you know, Astartes height. I mean, he made them to kill Astartes, basically. But they're Astartes height. They have chiseled features. They're very unnerving. Mm-hmm. And that's what he calls his perfect human. But he made her in order to reproduce and birth other perfect humans. So he even calls her the mother of a new species. He created this woman to just populate an entire new species of perfect humans. And the idea is that by the end of it, they don't want them to exist, so he sends them all into the webway, and he's basically trying to save his children, quote unquote. But even he succeeded at doing that. He created this perfect race capable of taking down Astartes. I mean, it even mentions in there that she has like a necklace of Space Marine teeth that she's killed. And even then, it didn't. I
need to read this book. This is sick.
And even then, it comes. You know, they make it a point to be like, all right,
power armor. What
no,
does she do?
They're just extra large humans, muscular humans with enhanced reflexes, and he took all the traits of a Space Marine and stuck it in a human being, and that was the result. But
damn, Fabius, you're fucking cooking over there. Holy shit.
But again, they make it, you know, all these people that want the muscle mommy Space Marines, you know, that's not going to be the result. The result is going to be closer to what he did, which is, you know, this kind of superhuman that's
horror show.
Yeah, that's very unnerving, you know?
Yeah.
And even, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
You know, finish
that thought.
Your discussion on, you know, Space Marines being transhuman. You know,
Mm-hmm.
even with the introduction of female Space Marines, there's still going to be almost. It's not going to be the features that.
Well, and can I say, this actually hits on something that I think that GW would have to address that would create a whole new series of problems. And so for me, it wouldn't make sense thematically, and it wouldn't make sense lore-wise. And what I mean by that is thematically, what Space Marines are supposed to be is the peak of humanity, but ironically losing humanity by becoming the peak. So by becoming an 8-foot tall demigod of war, gigafast reflexes, all that kind of stuff, you turn into like some kind of abhuman monster who is no longer able to identify with your species. And they haven't directly addressed like the asexuality of Space Marines, but it's kind of presumed that like the Emperor of Mankind programmed them to be asexual, and also their like monastic warrior life just kind of leads to that outcome where they're not really interested in sex, they're only interested in war. And sex is, I would say one of the sex and death are the primary drivers of life. That's what we care about. If you look at media, it has to do with sex and death, even tangentially. And so when you introduce female Astartes, you can say like, oh yeah, they're asexual too. But why would there never be the temptation, especially amongst Astartes, especially amongst people who fall to chaos routinely? Even before there were female Space Marines, legionnaires in the Horus Heresy said, we are the peak of humanity. Why would we be ruled by mortals? Why would we allow normal humans to rule us and dictate how we govern our affairs? And that pride led to like the Horus Heresy and the downfall, and so many Space Marines siding with the forces of chaos. Why would a loyalist Space Marine not look at a female Space Marine that they were fighting with and being like, why don't I have sexual impulses? Why don't we reproduce? Why don't we recreate the Ubermensch of humanity and then destroy the Imperium? Humanity is weak. They're incapable of defending themselves. They're reliant on us, the Astartes, the ceramite-clad warriors, to defend them from everything. Why the fuck would we trust the future of the human species to mere mortals? And then at that point, you create an obvious vector of chaos corruption that I think is so obvious, I think it would have to be narratively addressed.
Oh, I agree.
Sorry, Dog wants to come in. I'm still listening.
At some point, you bring up chaos as a vector. You would think if it could be done, the Emperor's Children would have done it by now. Given the
well, and see, weirdly, I think that what you brought up with like Fabius Bio creating like the perfect humans that are like peers to Astartes while not being Astartes themselves, and also kind of like the perfect humans or whatever. I think you could retcon that or expand that relatively easily and be like, these females are so perfect, they're capable of taking on like a chaos corrupted modified version of Gene Seed, and then therefore they're the muscle mommy, dommy, whatever the fuck that all these fucking lefty degenerate fucks are looking for, and then boom, you got female Chaos Space Marines. Of course, that'll never be enough for the progressives. So then I wanted to kind of get into another vector through which I would accept not female Space Marines, but female Space Marines. And so I think that if you bring in female Space Marines, you have to address what I just said, which is why wouldn't Space Marines turn traitor in mass in order to create the Ubermensch of humanity? Why would they need mortal humans anymore if sexual reproduction was on the table amongst Astartes? And if it wasn't because they were asexually programmed, how does Chaos not just instantly walk in there and being like, hey, I'll give you your sex drive back and you and your battle sister can hook up and you guys can create like a new super species and destroy all of humanity and conquer the galaxy, and you're strong enough to do it. So why don't you do that? If they bring in female Space Marines and they don't address that narratively, they are fundamentally failing in one of the giant flaws I see in the progressive thematic lore-based problems. But this is probably the most acceptable way that I would take it. The way that I would take it is I would say Belisarius Cawl is a tinkerer, right? He likes fucking with things. He likes engineering things, all that kind of shit. So what I would say is Belisarius Cawl was fucking around with gene seed. He wasn't able to figure out how to do one-to-one gene seed for female Space Marines, but he was able to figure out how to enhance female warriors. And so as a result, you have Primaris Sisters of Silence and Primaris Sisters of Battle. You know, they're higher in toughness, faster reflexes. They got an extra heart, and they can't do the 3 lungs for some reason or some shit. But you come out with basically Primaris Sisters of Silence and Primaris Sisters of Battle. And then you say some Sisters of Battle, they still work for the Ecclesiarchy, but they've been working with Space Marines for so long that they've created their own covens, or whatever the fuck they call them, their own priories that are more tactical than they are church-based. And then that way, you kind of get like more tactical Sisters of Battle. You still get females who are gene enhanced, but you don't have the conflict that I already highlighted. And like that, while I wouldn't necessarily like it, I would be okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's feasible. And as you mentioned earlier, I don't think that would be the end of it, though, because the core of the argument is that Space Marines are the poster child. We want that. We want to replace the poster child and have this at the forefront. That way, somehow that's going to bring in more women to the hobby. I don't understand that logic.
It's going to bring in more trans women. Let's be real, okay? It's not going to bring any fucking... It's going to bring in an extra 6 cis women, okay?
Yeah.
90% of the fucking women who are going to come into the hobby are going to be trans women.
But that's...
Sorry.
You know, it's funny that you... in getting into all the culture war bullshit, you know, as much as I hate talking about it, it's exactly what it boils down to. Especially for the female Space Marine argument. It's this
loud, annoying subgroup that won't shut the fuck up.
There's this thing that we want, and we're not going to stop until we get it. And if you don't like it, then you're a racist, bigot, homophobic, whatever buzzword they can think of at the time. And
my answer is yes, because I'm so tired of being called those fucking labels. And I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. You caught me.
And you know,
I'm a bigoted piece of shit because I don't want female Space Marines. You got me.
But typically the people that are loudest, that are against it, that are being labeled all of these things, is some of the most diverse groups of people that you can think of. I mean, it's not like it's just straight white males that are saying, nope, we don't want that. It's everybody that's in the hobby that, you know, even gives a slight shit about it, that just don't want to see it go the route of, all right, now we've got a Star Wars clone, you know? And
yeah, and that's the other thing. It's like, if let's say that GW, God forbid, right? We've talked so much about how we think that there's a lot of passionate people. GW, to my knowledge, they fuck over their employees. They underproduce intentionally in order to make sure that their shit is exclusive. So it gets like, they don't really give a shit about the black market for the after sale stuff. They have weird bans for their tournaments. That way people have to buy GW exclusive plastic. You know, XYZ ABC. Throw every single corporate insult that you possibly can at GW. I still think that it's obvious that there are dozens, if not hundreds of people. I don't know how many people they employ, but there are dozens, if not hundreds, of genuinely passionate people who love Warhammer and love Warhammer 40K, care about it, care about its development, care about its roots, and care about its future. And so I hope it's impossible that a Disney level corporation comes in and says, you need to be the next Star Wars, because you're going to lose the underlying spirit of what Warhammer is, which is like grim dark. Grim dark is what makes Warhammer Warhammer.
Well, you know, it all goes back to that, well, we need to be more inclusive, right? But one thing that never comes up in the argument, especially when the female Space Marine argument, is that, especially in the lore and in the games, GW has been putting out just back to back to back to back. All right, here's a badass woman. Here's another one. Here's another one.
Here's a female.
Here's another one.
Here's a female Titan pilot. Here's a female fucking Knight pilot. Here's a, you know, female Inquisitor. Here's a female this, that, the other. Yeah.
You can't say that they haven't been trying. And in fact, I would argue that some of the women in the setting are some of the most badass women in the setting. I mean, you've got Minka Lesk, you've got Ursula Creed, you've got Lotara Saren. I mean, hell, even in what was it, Angels of Blood? Angels of Blood. They did that
Captain Sulkin.
Yeah,
Captain Sulkin's phenomenal. Captain Sulkin and the Mechanicus Priest, Castia Theta 9. Yep. She was creepy, but she was interesting as fuck. And same thing with Hell's Reach, which I think was done by the same animator for Angels of Death. I'm trying to think of her name, but the Imperator Titan pilot of Storm Herald. I'm trying to think of her name. It's not coming back to me. But the prioress for the Sisters of Battle of the Argent Shroud, where they do their last stand at the Temple of Hell's Reach, of the Temple of the Emperor Ascendant, and the female Titan pilot, they're commanding and intimidating and competent and intelligent and mean and rhetorically gifted and tough and violent, and they're elbow to elbow with all the male warriors doing what needs doing. And it's like, if you gave a shit about representation, right? Meaning that we want young women and girls to look into the Warhammer 40,000 universe and see themselves. There are plenty of positive examples of females in the Warhammer 40K universe. And like you said, particularly in the books, they've been made primary protagonists.
Yep.
So really all that's left from like a representation standpoint, if you actually gave a shit about female representation, is just having like them featured in a animated series, which by the way, they did with Black Talon. Yep. They did that with the Age of Sigmar series. So literally you just need a 40K equivalent of that and boom, you're good. But no, we have to have female Space Marines. And at some point, I literally just hope Games Workshop tells these people to fuck off. I really do. I hope some CEO works up some balls and he's like, I've been receiving these tweets and emails daily for the past 30 years. I'm just going to tell you right now, the best you're going to get is gene-engineered Sisters of Battle, and you can kit bash them with Phobos armor to make them more tactical. Besides that, you can go fuck yourself. Like, I really wish they would just come out and say that.
But that's the thing, is that on the table, outside of a Games Workshop regulated tournament, you can make whatever. Yeah, you can make whatever the hell you want. Nobody's going to say anything, not a word. And as much as they want to make it seem like people are going to screech to the high heavens if they see a female Space Marine on the table, if you go into a local store and somebody's fielding one, nobody's going to give a shit. You know, you know
what? On top of that, I'll make it a fucking funny meme where I'll be like, I'm a chud. You're a progressive. You want female Space Marines. I don't like that, but you don't like me not liking that. I'm going to pretend that you're some Belisarian call heresy, and I'm going to try to wipe your army off the board, and you can pretend that I'm a fucking chud asshole, and you can try to kill me. And boom, we have like an internal narrative of an imperial civil war where Belisarius Call did some weird shit with some gene-enhanced females, and it's my job to kill them all, and it's your job to kill me. Boom, we have a narrative, we have a fun game, and we can play, and we can shit-talk each other. I wouldn't give two fucks if that was the case. Yeah, but it's the constant screeching on social media that fucking drives me up the wall. Well, and also the lore inconsistencies that we went over earlier.
Well, that's where the discourse seems to happen primarily on social media. If you go into a store, you're not gonna. It's like one of those things that nobody talks about. You know, nobody wants to bring up that argument inside the store, and then people start throwing minis everywhere, tables start flying. You name it.
I'm going to be, unfortunately, I'm probably going to be a toxic influence on the gaming scene or whatever, because I think my channel is just going to grow and grow. And I know like a lot of people are really averse to discussing their opinions, but I'm probably going to be pretty open with them.
I mean, I'm pushing 40. I could care less what somebody on the internet has to say about me or my opinions. Right. You know, it's tiring, and there's coming from the left, and especially when it comes to progressives wanting this ideal, and I know we're sort of going into politics. I'm going to try not to push into politics.
No, you can. I'm literally I don't want to say half, but 20% of what I do is politics for sure.
Yeah, that's actually how I started following you. The first time I even found out who you were was on a Destiny stream, and I think y'all were arguing about, I don't fucking know. Destiny was saying
probably
we can't have something
Biden's penis.
Yeah, probably. But you know, going into that whole progressive ideology of everything needs to fit, everything has to be put into a box and fit neatly, everybody has to get along, you know, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Human beings are not wired that way to, you know, jolly cooperation. It just, we're not.
Well, you know what's here's another funny lore inconsistency for me. Since when the fuck has the Imperium ever been progressive? You know what I'm saying? Like ever. So they're a theocratic, authoritarian suit. Like I would use fascist because I've gotten into the political definitions, but I understand people get, you know, annoyed with that. But they're at minimum like an authoritarian, pseudo-theocratic, oligopoly, you know, regime that is like dysfunctional and fucking crazy. At what point would somebody walk up to Belisarius Call and say, hey, Mr. Call, I think that it's really a shame that you don't have more female Space Marines. And Belisarius Call would be like, you're right, sweetheart. Let me get right on that. In what fucking universe would that ever happen? Like, you could repeat. It's like the Avengers Endgame scenario. It's like out of 435 million iterations, we only win in one. And it's like out of 435 million iterations, there are still 0 in which Belisarius Call creates female Space Marines out of the goodness of his heart.
Yeah. And, you know, the whole thing is that he's calculating. He's only going to do something if it's a benefit. And
so if I can come up with 10 problems off of the front of my head, how many problems do you think he can come up with his fucking robot brain?
Exactly. And, you know, I would have to say, and going back to, you know, the whole topic of how this works in the real world outside of the internet, if you go into a store and you'll hear them talk, and by them, I mean progressives, you'll hear them talk like if you walk into a Games Workshop store, you're going to get stared at by 50 white guys that want you to get out. And, I mean, hell, the last time that my wife went with me, and my wife is just barely kind of getting into it, you know, we listen to audiobooks when we go on road trips, and she asked me questions like, oh, who's this? And why did this guy do that? And I'm like, okay, well, now I need to go back to why Magnus did nothing wrong. And, but, you know, going into the store, everybody
I was there the day that Horus slew the Emperor.
Yeah.
Kick it to page 1 of the fucking Horus heresy.
You know, walking into a store, it's people want to talk to you about the hobby. People want you to get into the hobby. There's nobody sitting there staring at you going, get out. You know,
get out, you colored woman.
Yeah. That's basically how they make it sound. And it's like, no. In fact, the last time that my wife went with me, she was having a conversation with a trans woman about Slaneshi demons.
Mm-hmm.
No slurs were being thrown. You know, there wasn't.
Well, and here's the thing: it's like there's memes that people could lean into if they wanted to, because Slanesh, like, not trying to throw all my, you know, trans friends into a fucking box or whatever, but Slanesh, they themselves are like fucking part female, part male. Like, everybody depicts them as female because they want like a sexy demon to try to seduce them and corrupt them to the fucking dark side and pursue perfection and all that kind of stuff. But half of the fucking demons have pecs and tits. And they also like they change, and like the warp is like it's a molding influence that changes things over time. So if you wanted to like envision yourself, if you were like a trans woman or a trans man and you were like, I want to, you know, if a god or goddess would reach out to me and give me the power to like flow between like genders or whatever, and all I had to do was promise them their, you know, my soul, and promise them that I would pursue ever higher levels of perfection and experience, then like that fits. it totally fits.
Yeah.
Pick your faction, create a sub faction, paint them in a custom color, design them how you want, use third-party bits to make them how you want. Nobody would fucking stop you, but you're trying to make the most straight-laced Imperial faction into basically Slaneshi demons, and you can go fuck yourself.
Yeah, and I have my own thoughts about paint schemes. I am cool with people painting minis however the hell they want.
Right.
But there's only one person that has a paint scheme that I have a problem with, and everybody's gonna fucking come for me for this, but I don't give a shit. I'm gonna say it anyway. I don't know if you know who Cerberus XT is.
Yeah.
The guy that paints...
I'm unfamiliar, but did he paint the Nazi one, or did he paint the United States of America one, or did he paint both?
Neither. Cerberus, Cerb, is the Pride Marine guy. The one that every single... trans flags, every single flag that you can think of.
Yeah.
That... The reason I have a problem with that in particular, mainly him, because A, he's an asshole, but B, is that there is ideology behind that. When you want to push an ideology and you want everybody to be like, nope, you have to like this. No, I don't. You can play it on the table. I'm not going to say anything. You can paint it however you want. I'm not going to say anything, but when you say, hey, I don't like this paint job, and somebody screams at you, oh, well, then you're a bigot, you know, that's what pisses me off.
And it's like, no, I don't like, sorry, real quick. So
go ahead.
The reason why I wouldn't like a transgender paint job on a Space Marine is because I'd be like, what's the in-universe lore leading to this paint scheme? So if you come up with like some like elaborate thing where they're like, they grew up on this planet and the sunsets are really pink, and, you know, the white and blue is from the feudal aristocracy that they arrived from, and blah, 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 blah. If you have an in-lore explanation, then yeah, cool. You created like a continual semi-logical reference for why you painted them in this color. But if you're like, yeah, I just like really support trans people, and it's like, okay, then you're breaking my immersion in the universe because you're taking exterior political bullshit and you're shoehorning it into the 40K universe, which, by the way, could be fun, but doesn't make sense in the reference that you're putting it in. And I'll shut up for now, but I have a specific thing that I'm thinking of in reference to communists. But sorry, go ahead.
Well, I mean, he even named that faction what do you call them? The gate crashers or something like that, in terms of, you know, keeping the gate.
What you're doing.
Yeah. It's all to kind of provoke a response. Sure. It's never just, hey, look at this cool thing that I made. It's always to try and get a reaction. And
that's what
I
unfollowed Bitshammer, and I was happy they blocked me like some months later, because they're so fucking annoying.
You know, Bits hides behind that whole I'm a veteran, I can, you know, I love my country, but I fucking hate it at the same time. Whatever. I don't know.
Well, in Bits, by the way, like, I would be curious. I would like it if Bitshammer posted like a DD-214 if they served in the United States military, because I saw a picture of them after the fact and they didn't look like much of a veteran. But, you know, that's neither here nor there. Sorry no. I do have someplace I want to go with the commies.
Oh, my point is that with bringing that up is not to say that I don't agree with people being allies or whatever they want to do. That you can do it. People can do whatever they want. But when you're doing it for
friends, I like them just
and so do I. And it's when you're doing it to provoke a response and create division inside of the hobby, and you know that's why you're doing it, and you keep doing it, and every time it comes up, it starts, you know, a whole nother set of problems and arguments. Then I feel like this is going back to, again, another problem that I have with the left. That's why I'm a centrist, because fuck everybody. Is
based
the lack of people on their own sides calling out the bad actors, being like, look, we agree with certain things, but you probably shouldn't do this. You probably shouldn't start internet fights every other day for the sake of it, you know? And that's...
Well, I'm hoping that's changed a little bit in the past 2 weeks. And the reason why I say that is because of the, you know, attack in Israel and Gaza. There were a whole bunch of online leftists that came out effectively pro-terrorism, which was absolutely fucking insane to see. And for like probably the past 5 or 10 years, I would say a lot of leftists were like denying that they had any kind of like violent lunatics on their side. And they're like, no. Like, you know, we have some crazy people, but they're not like violent or bad or authoritarian. They're not going to do anything crazy. And then all the crazy people who are going to do anything crazy are on the right. And then like you have the, you know, the terror attacks in the past like 2 weeks, and you basically have people like cheering on the massacre of civilian families inside their homes. And it's like, oh, wow, look at all these authoritarian douchebags apologizing for murder, and they're on your side. I hope you do some real analysis about whether or not there are bad guys on your side, quote unquote, and whether or not they're worth calling out, because obviously they're worth calling out.
Well, sorry. No, I was going to say that's from both sides, both the left and the right, saying some of the most,
but I'm sympathetic to the right, but also I spend a healthy chunk of my time on political stuff, like calling out douchebags on the right. So
yeah, but I mean, I'm just talking about the fact that people are outing themselves, saying reprehensible shit, you know, anti-Semitic shit on both sides, and you're kind of like, wait a minute, that's not good. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with the whole thing at this point. But I'll let you lead into your communist.
Yeah, so I wanted to bring this up because I think it's fantastic. If you're a socialist or a communist, there are fantastic factions for you to play, and a lot of them have women or have things that don't have gender. So for instance, there is, I forget what they're called. They're like Gabos or something, the Gabo Gits or something like that. But there's Gretchen, who feel like they are mistreated by orc society.
The working class.
As a result, they want to have a proletarian revolution in the name of the Gretchen. And this is like an in-lore thing where they have like Gretchen who are sick of being mistreated by the orcs. So they want to have a revolution where the Gretchen runs society. It's hilarious. If you're a fucking communist or a Marxist-Leninist or a socialist and you want to fucking play like an explicitly socialist section or like a Marxist faction, the Gretchen are perfect for you.
Well, I'm waiting for the whole orc Bolshevik revolution to happen, and then, you know, maybe they'll stop.
Yeah, and then there's also Tau and Gene Stealer Cult. So Gene Stealer Cult, I made a video on this, I think they're the perfect representation of Marxist-Leninists. And the reason why I say that is because like Marxist-Leninists believe that the people are like too stupid to rise up for a socialist revolution themselves. So as a result, they infiltrate all the higher levels of power, and then in a snap, they basically like behead the state. They take out all their political rivals. They do X, Y, Z, ABC in order to seize power. They seize power, and they have a glorious revolution in the name of the people. That's what Marxist-Leninists aim to do, and or vanguard communists aim to do. And I think that is perfectly politically parallel to what the Gene Stealer Cult do, because they infiltrate the upper echelons of power. They use sex and politics and, you know, weapons and influence to their betterment. They climb into the highest echelons of society, and then without without warning, they decapitate the state and take it over. Now, of course, they do this in the name of the many-armed God, and then they all end up getting devoured by Tyranids. But historical parallels, I think they're also a socialist faction.
Yeah, and of course, with the Tau, you have the greater good, you know.
Chinese communist.
Yep, it all fits.
All day, every day. Chinese history is filled with people who fight in the name of the greater good, who care about social harmony, who care about their people and all that kind of stuff. But they use dystopian, authoritarian, gaslighting, politics and propaganda in order to achieve their goals. And if you look at the CCP, and if you look at some of imperial Chinese history, and if you look at probably the history of the Communist Party in the 20th century, you will see a shitload of historical parallels to the Tao. So if you are a Chinese communist simp in real life and you want women in your faction, play Tao.
Yeah.
It's right there.
Yeah.
They're powerful. They got weapons. They got Gundam suits. What the fuck is not to like?
You know, bringing up the Gundam suits, just segue here real quick. The what was it? Was it the Exarch? Was that one of the first ones that Warhammer TV put up? Exodite.
Yeah.
That scene with the Titan coming out of nowhere and all the little battle suits flying at this Titan and just poking them with lasers only to have another fucking Titan come out and just vaporize everything is peak Warhammer.
Yeah, but that was, so somebody pointed this out. It was like, this was supposed to be a Tau narrative, and it ended up just being like a vehicle for the Eldar and the Imperium. And I was like, it's true, but you did get like pretty well rendered Tau shit, you know? Yeah. And if you exclude the Tau getting their asses kicked, like if you just ignore the part where like a Death Corps of Krieg character killed a Tau with basically what amounted to a fucking maul. He killed a Tau with a fucking hammer. If you ignore that part, it's still pretty good.
Yeah, and, you know, the Warhammer fandom.
I do feel bad for Tau. I do feel bad for the Tau people.
You know, the Warhammer fandom, I think you will have hardcore stands of each faction. I mean, you've got people that only love Space Marines. You got people that only love Tau, that only love Orcs, that only love Tyranids. You know, you all have these little microcosms of people that are like, all right, nope, mine is the best. You know, that's all I play. That's all I want. Hell, Chaos too. And, you know, the fact is, the hobby itself is diverse already. The amount of people that love Warhammer, the amount of people that are in the hobby, the amount of people, and that's why I argue so much with the show minis crowd, is that it was many, many years before I even bought a mini, and I was already well versed in 40K lore, just off books alone. So the people that say lore doesn't matter really fucking piss me off, because it does. There's a history. There's history, there's backstory. Yeah, there's fluff every now and again because you want to know a little bit more about this obscure thing that nobody knows about. But yeah, it matters.
Does their best with some half-assed lore. Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, as you solidify and you have like internal consistency, that's important. And so when I quote tweeted somebody with the Lord of the Rings meme where it's like, oh, you can believe in dragons, but you can't believe in a BMW Z28i, and it's like, no, motherfucker, like it has to mesh with the existing structure. And so that's why I love, I'm still trying to think of the Titan lady's name, but basically, like, I can still see her face, I can still see her warped, corrupted body. But the reason why she makes sense is because Titan pilots are like, you know, Space Marines are supposed to be 1 in 1,000 or whatever, is like somebody who's capable of being in Astartes. Titan pilots who can manage like a warlord or a greater or an imperator, it's supposed to be like 1 in 1,000,000 or like 1 in 10 million is somebody who can command the machine spirit of a Titan. And so she was born in a hive slum, you know, probably a bunch of terrible shit happened to her as she was growing up. She somehow got in good with the Mechanicum. They did some kind of test in order to figure out that she was able to command one of the most powerful war machines in all of history. She commands that war machine, and then she also commands a, you know, like a, I don't want to say like a fleet, but it's like an arm of the Invigilata war group or some shit like that. So she's political, she's astute, she's powerful, and she's also warped by the battle. Literally, her body has like partially dissolved because she's been in that like tank to command the Titan for probably decades. And so the point is, like, she is so scarred by the experience that she makes sense because she is a tough, fucked up lady who survived all the fucked up parts of the 40K universe. But if you're just like, oh yeah, you're a woman and boom, you can just be a Space Marine, it's like you're robbing the specialness of a Space Marine. Like, even with Space Marine men, like, while it's like every young man's fantasy to, like, you know, basically go through a gigapuberty and turn into Arnold Schwarzenegger and then be able to fight battles in ceramide armor across the galaxy, like, the promise of the 40K universe is that out of 999 men who have that dream, only, like, all of them will die and only one other person will succeed in that dream. And that's the beauty of the universe.
Well, you brought up that whole male power fantasy thing. You know, one of the core elements to the whole Space Marine faction is this brotherhood. And I saw somebody get fucking reamed just for bringing that up. But it's true. You know, it's all about this relationship that they have among themselves and to their Primarch and to the Emperor. And somewhere in, I'm one of those people that I don't have to be a certain thing in order to identify with it, to empathize with it. And that's one of those things where it's like, this applies to everybody, you know, this whole, you know, companionship and brotherhood in the face of sometimes insurmountable odds and overwhelming potential death, 9 times out of 10. You know, you don't have to, you know, this thing doesn't have to look like you in order for you to understand it and for you to relate to it. You know, you being in
warrior fraternity, yeah.
And you being, you know, former law enforcement, military veteran, you know, that's men and women in the military, I would assume, for the most part, go through the same situations. And by saying that, I mean, same thing goes with the books and the lore and everything else. It's like, you don't have to be this thing in order to, or even having experienced this thing, of course that helps, in order to relate to it and to be like, all right, this is a good thing, you know?
Well, in the fraternity, I'm probably beating a dead horse, so I don't want to loop too hard. But like the fraternity of warriors is still in the books and the lore already. So when you have the last stand of Hell's Reach, you have I forget the major, but there's like Major Riken and the adjutant Tiro or something like that. There's so there's like a female adjutant. There's the prioress, and there's the 2 sisters from the Argent Shroud. In, you know, so there's females who are like, they're standing and fighting and dying alongside the men. So you have this fraternity of warriors, and then you might have like a more nuanced exploration of brotherhood, particularly in the early books of the Horus Heresy.
The like warrior lodges.
Yo, I almost cried like a few times when they were dealing with like Horus being like mortally wounded or whatever, because I genuinely understood the pain of Loken, where he was like, we have to let our dad die because we're destroying all of our principles in order to keep him alive. And then you have young little Horus and you have Abaddon, who are like, no, fuck you, and fuck you for giving up on our dad. You're a fucking traitor, and we'll do whatever it takes in order to save his life. And so on one hand, you want to impugn them because they're sacrificing all of their principles in order to save their father. But on the other hand, you completely understand it, because if you had to make a bargain with the devil in order to save one of the most important people in the universe that you personally love, that is something that you can empathize with. And so that story alone of like, what is the duty of brothers to each other and what is the duty of a son to his father, that is an incredibly important like moral contemplation.
Well, the same thing goes with, you had so many characters inside of the Horus Heresy that split from their, essentially from their parents, you know, from their father. Yeah. Loken with Horus, you had Garo.
Dantiok with the Iron Warriors.
Yeah, Garo with Mortarion. In fact, there's an entire book dedicated to Garo actually facing off with Mortarion, and Mortarion basically trying to get him to come to the other side, like, hey, I don't want to kill you.
Son.
Yeah, I don't want to kill you. I want you over here. And of course, Garo was like, nope, not going to do it. And it's all these familial ties that are sort of interwoven in the story, you know, like
yeah, and that's part of the thing where you can see some good even in the bad characters, because like Horus was a ruthless bastard, so he was pretty much willing to fuck over his sons or whatever, and like he only made like some gestures to Loken to try to convince him to, you know, turn traitor or whatever. But with Garo in particular, the only reason why he was spared in the first place because like Mortarion thought that he was a loyalist. He was like, he's going to be a loyalist, but I like him. He's a great warrior. I want to save him. So instead of killing him, keep him on the ship, keep him away from everything. Once it's all done, we'll recruit him. You know, don't worry about it or whatever. But because of his fatherly love for one of his favorite sons, he actually jeopardizes the entire heresy. So it's like it's a story of like love. And I this is obviously in the backdrop of like genocide and virus bombing and flesh melting and all that kind of stuff. So you don't have to feel too gay about men, expressing feelings and having feelings and all that kind of stuff. But some of the most poignant and emotional parts of the narrative are when you're talking about decisions between honor and loyalty and family and brothers and fathers and all that kind of stuff, and also the consequences of those decisions. Where one of the things that Saul Tarvitz, the Emperor's Children guy, I read Fulgrim, and by the way, the first time I read it, I didn't get through it because I didn't think it was that well read, and written, and I didn't really know what was going on and all that kind of shit. My second reading, I don't want to say that became one of my favorite books, but it became one of my favorite pieces of lore. And the reason why is because Saul Tarvitz has this perception of what his legion is supposed to be. It's supposed to be the pursuit of perfection, not already believing that you're perfect, but the attempts to become more perfect, and like martial prowess and constantly training and being diligent and taking care of your gear and like all this kind of stuff. It's all supposed to be about becoming your best self. But then what people corrupt that into is believing that you're already perfect as you are. And that's what like Eidolon and Lucius do. And so you see the tragedy where he realizes that the ideal that he has been following for so long has been corrupted and destroyed, and he now has to betray the institution that he loves in order to save other people. And it's heart-wrenching. It's absolutely gut-wrenching to read.
Well, and there's plenty of moments like that. I think one of my favorite parts of the entire series, in fact, out of any book I've read yet, is during the drop site massacre on Isfahan. And they're virus bombing the planet, and I always forget their names. But it was the Dreadnought
and the soldier he's carrying.
And they're basically trying to save him, and he's like, well, why didn't you tell me that you had a hole in your sarcophagus? And, it's basically this big fuck you to the traitors of, all right, we're going to die together, but we're going to go out on our own terms. And then he blows himself up. The Dreadnought self-destructs. And it's...
Yo, that fucked me up.
Yeah.
Fucked me up. And it's because you have men and like I don't know if this is like vestigial memories, like we're all cavemen and shit, so we our ancestors were hunting and hitting animals with rocks and dying of bad water and all that kind of shit, but they probably lived in communities and tribes, and they probably had some level of like warriorhood and fraternity and productivity and all that kind of stuff in order to survive. We were all like bands of people working together to survive, and so it almost feels like a memory to the difficulty of human life when you have two warriors who realize they're not going to make it. And so all they can do is choose a death on their own terms. And that was like, and then also like the horror of what was about to happen to them, because like the flesh eater virus or whatever, which this is one of the most like haunting descriptions of violence I've ever heard. So it's like, the flesh eater virus, it comes down into the atmosphere, it reduces all biological matter into its base components. As a result, all the gases are released into the atmosphere, and then they hit the atmosphere with like cyclone torpedoes or heat lances or whatever, and then it sets the sky on fire. And like, I could not think of a more apocalyptic end to a planet than that. And so to be like human, or even like a dreadnought, which is a human interred inside like a walking war machine, and then looking up into the sky and looking around you and just seeing life being melted and turned into gas. And like also knowing that fate is coming for you. That was just like one of the most like, it was horrifying. It was haunting. And yet like the love between those two men before they decide like, hey, we're going to punch out. It was incredible. It was an incredible read.
Yeah, it was the emotion in just that one part is where it's like, oh shit, you know, these guys actually care about each other. And it, you know, again, going back to that whole brotherhood trope, and but I mean, that's what it boils down to. That's the basis. That's 40K at its core is humanity in all, well, humanity working together in the face of, you know, horrible odds, you know, certain death on certain planets even. And, you know, to try and reduce that to, you know, Imperium bad. It's just, it's so nuanced.
Yeah,
there's so
Imperium
much
should be progressive. Yeah.
There's so much going on. It's like, you can't just cookie cutter this thing into what you want it to be when there's just so much.
Yeah. Or say that a BMW Z28i belongs in my fucking war story alongside two fucking warriors who are watching an apocalypse unfold in front of them, and then they choose a relatively like noble suicide over a horrible death. And it's like, why isn't a BMW Z28i in there? And it's like, get fucked. Fuck off. And like, so that's what we've just been talking about for like the past like 3 to 5 minutes is I think that's why people are so personal and reflexively defensive about it, is because like, yeah, like at the end of the day, like, sure, it's plastic toys that you paint and then you roll dice on the table and you war game with your friends and all that kind of shit. So at the end of the day, like, it's a hobby, but also it, you know, the literature explores exactly what you were saying, is like humanity binding together in order to rage against the dying of the light. And considering we're all mortal, so we all have to face our real end in real life, Warhammer, to me, feels more emotionally real to the real world than Star Wars or any of these other like more fluffy fantasies. Because in the fluffy fantasies, you know, the rogue gets the princess and they get married. Obviously, you know, he gets stabbed by his son in the chest later, but let's ignore that for a second. Or the chosen one gets chosen and they actually succeed, or whatever. Like, there's actually a story of like the hero wins, you know, like they struggle, but they win. Whereas real life is like, it's about choosing what you win, but still ultimately knowing that you're going to lose. And so weirdly enough, I'm just going to bring this up as a side tangent. You know, we got like maybe 10, 15 minutes left.
Sure.
But but that's actually something that I found really interesting about fantasy versus Age of Sigmar. So in fantasy, they ended the world. They destroyed it. They had their apocalypse. You know, chaos won.
Yep.
And a lot of people were really upset by that. But I was like, that doesn't change anything. Like in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, you think there's going to be a good ending to this? Like, no, like the whole point is to rage against the dying of the light. So for me, like, at least looking back, because I wasn't involved, that doesn't change anything. I would still play Warhammer Fantasy now, as long as you have cool units. But then when it comes to Age of Sigmar, one of the things that I like, some people have called it Noble Bright. I don't think it's Noble Bright at all. I think it's more Noble Bright than all the other series, but it's still Noble Bright. But if Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer 40,000 are about raging against the dying of the light, Age of Sigmar is about trying to claim like a bright future out of a dead world. And I think that's so interesting because, like, yeah, the fucking the Sigmarines, the Stormcast, they're like technically immortal, but they lose parts of their humanity every single time they're reforged, and they don't always get reforged. And then the mortals, Age of Sigmar is fucking terrifying. Are you kidding me? Like, there's Nurgle demons, and there's fucking Dark Elves, and there's fucking Sylvaneth wood creatures that want to rip me apart. You want me to go colonize a fucking realm of fire, and that's the most like civilized place I can be, is effectively like a volcano land? Are you fucking shitting me? Like, dude, Sigmar, if you're Realms of Sigmar, like, it catches a lot of shit, but if you're a normal person in Age of Sigmar, the realms are horrifying.
Yeah, and you know, circling back, and I'm surprised we haven't even talked about this. I know we're short on time, but this is just one of the main themes of 40K is faith. And that's an argument that never comes up, is this underlying theme of all these people have some sort of faith in the Emperor. You know, the Emperor protects.
The Garo series was crazy. And sorry, please continue on your point. But the Garo series for me was like, it was like reading the religious experience of another person that you sympathize with.
Yeah. And that's why I'm surprised that it never comes up. You never hear people talking about faith, even though the word faith is thrown around constantly in the setting and in the media. I mean, Sisters of Battle are fucking fanatical warrior nuns. You know, same thing with Space Marines. You got warrior monks that are just, like you said, genetically programmed to be faithful to the Emperor for the most part.
But misplaced faith is a huge theme as well. And also faith in something that isn't true, but still has a positive result. That's another huge theme. Yeah. So, so just in case people haven't read Flight of the Eisenstein or whatever, which it's like skill issue, go read it. But effectively what happens is like a Death Guard captain, he gets wounded, he's on the ship, he sees the Horus Heresy unfolding, he flees, his ship is heavily damaged, he goes into the warp, he arrives back at Earth, and I don't want to do spoilers, but guess what? You should go fucking read it. I think the book's like 20 years old at this point. And so he arrives, and like the Emperor has never pronounced himself a god. He's never claimed to be a god. If anything, he's claimed the opposite. And yet, Garo, during his trials and tribulations, he has to keep leaning back onto his faith in the Imperium, his faith in like the Emperor of Mankind, his faith in humanity, and his faith in his crew and his fellow warriors in order to deal with horrors that should not be possible. You're basically talking about like a fedora level Reddit atheist who doesn't believe in anything outside of material reality being witness to demons and gods coming alive in front of his face. And so like, that's where you have this crisis of faith where it's like, my belief system, how does it even function in the face of such like malevolence and misunderstood power? And yet he has to lean on to it in order to be victorious. A phenomenal book. Flight of the Eisenstein, I think, I've only really read like the first like 6 Horus Heresy novels, but Flight of the Eisenstein has to be one of my favorite books. It's fantastic.
Same. And, you know, the entire Horus Heresy is going down this, what is essentially a parallel to the Bible with the Lectitio Divinitatis. Basically, you had somebody who witnessed all these horrors and is like, well, if this is possible, then it's possible for the Emperor to be a god. And of course, you have people being like, no, this is heresy. That's heretical. You can't have that. He's not a god. And more and more people.
The blood of martyrs is the seeds of the church, and that's a Christian saying. And then not only that, like so here's actually something that I would be really curious to debate like a GW canon writer on, because like the insistence, because I still have to read, I have to read it, is whatever the book is about the Emperor, because allegedly in there he talks about like his whole philosophy, how he rules how he perceives the world, what he wants to do, the Master of Mankind. Yeah, so I need to read Master of Mankind because I need to understand the Emperor in his own words. But the truth is that like after being worshipped for 10,000 years, manifesting miracles, manifesting like effectively imperial demons, and also being the de facto god of order for humanity, how has he not achieved godlike, and he's also a perpetual, how has he not achieved godlike apotheosis? And apotheosis is like the process through which a mortal becomes a god. And so like for me, like I wouldn't listen to a single fucking thing the Emperor said because he's wrong about his own divinity. Like he actually like, I think the Black Templars are more correct about the Emperor's divinity than the Emperor is himself, at least as far as I can tell.
Yeah, and again, there's all these parallels to, religious dogma.
Mythology, yeah.
Yeah, and but you never hear even the, like, as you put it, the hardest core of atheists bring that up, that play. You know, it's one of those arguments that's like, wait a minute. You're opposed to everything else, but you're not opposed to the whole religious overtones of all of this, you know?
And well, I think the reason why the atheists are okay with it, consciously or subconsciously, is that the emperor is a dead god. And so I think that the part of the subtext of the lessons learned is that, like, the Imperium, relatively speaking, is based on a lie. Whether you view the imperial truth as the lie or the imperial cult as a lie, one of them's a lie, right?
Yep.
So, and then not only that, the emperor is effectively dead. Like, he's not in his full form. He's clinging to life. He's barely able to manifest his material form as he tries to hold the things around. So he's not a god in the creator of the universe definition of a creator god. And so as a result, I think atheists can look at that and they can say, as much as you see people seeing miracles and having faith and achieving good things through faith, they also fundamentally believe in something that is incorrect one way or the other. And so as a result, they don't have to put on their fedora and then start arguing it.
Yeah. But yeah, I know you got to go soon. So before we get out of here,
yeah,
what's your craziest 40K theory?
It's not a craziest 40K theory. I would say my craziest 40K theory is that, like, I think effectively the Emperor of Mankind is a god. He's the human god of order. Like, that would be my heretical belief that I would spread as far and wide as possible, is that the Emperor, even if he wasn't a god during the Horus Heresy, he has become a god through worship and apotheosis and all that kind of stuff. What I would say is my favorite fan theory that I think the End in the Death has not fulfilled was, I thought it would be really cool if Sanguinius basically, like, lost his shit and murder stomped the fuck out of Horus, but then attacked the Emperor and, like, mortally wounded the Emperor, and then the Emperor had to, like, psychically blast Horus's soul so he wouldn't be able to report that Sanguinius had turned traitor, and effectively, like, Khorne would have recruited him as a demon, and then the Emperor had to, like, begrudgingly kill Sanguinius in order to save his own life. I thought that would be an interesting twist, because then you're adding another lie, you know, Plato talks about the noble lie, like the philosopher kings having to tell their people some kind of fundamental lie in order to bring people together in order to have a stable kingdom. I think that would be really interesting, but if they didn't do it in the lore, then I would understand.
So mine is bringing Ferrus Manus back at the head of the Legion of the Damned.
Nice.
So, of course, I mean, for people that don't know, the Legion of the Damned just sort of pops out at the peak of when they're about to lose, any sort of Space Marine unit is about to lose. And they, you know, you got these Space Marines in fire armor, you know, popping up out of nowhere and wiping everything out. I think
Imperial demons, essentially.
Yeah, basically. It would be plausible that, all right, well, who's leading the Legion of the Damned? Well, Ferrus Manus got his head chopped off, so why not him?
Yeah. So my Ferrus Manus thing is, I think that there was lore that Fulgrim had, like, cloned Ferrus Manus repeatedly and tried to get him to turn traitor repeatedly, and he kept killing him over and over again because he wouldn't do it. So this is what I would do, and we got 3 minutes, so I'll try to make it relatively brief. What I would do is I would bring back every Primarch in some form or fashion, traitor and loyalist, except for Horus. Horus is permadeath. But
not necessarily.
I know they had the clone, but Abaddon killed them. But see, part of the theory, this is something that Major Kill has popularized that I agree with, is that the warp part of the Primarch is not just the genetic perfection of the Primarch body. That's not their entirety. They have a warp essence that was placed inside the body. And so as a result, the reason why you have, like, Sanguinius, there's still the Sanguinor, There's still like the Black Angel of Baal who possesses Mephiston, and there's a Sanguinor who's like the Angel of Light or some shit. I don't know where that lore is confirmed, but it's alleged that this is like the split soul of Sanguinius that's manifested in these ways. You know, you have Fulgrim, like his soul was trapped. I don't know if it was like trapped in a painting or some shit. I forget the whole like narrative there, but like, so like Fulgrim's like loyalist soul, part of his soul was like trapped when he was possessed as a demon. And so now like it's still Fulgrim, it's still him, but his whatever his good essence is trapped somewhere else. And so you have like these perpetual energies, like Vulcan, he's perpetual as well. You have these perpetual energies, these effectively these like warp demigods that are placed inside a Primarch body. And so I say all of that to say, like, Leman Russ, he could come out of the warp any second. Jakati Khan could come out of the warp any second. Wouldn't be a problem. Ferrus Manus, you could have a loyalist clone that somehow the soul of Ferrus Manus made its way back in there, and then boom, you got Ferrus Manus back. Sanguinius, I don't want him to regain his fullness, because like I would just prefer it if it was just like the Sanguinor, like just a Sanguinor shows up or some shit like that, because I don't want his sacrifice to mean nothing.
Yeah, plus we already got Dante, who's been wanting to die for like ever. Just like, nope, you get to go over here.
But does he? So here's a question. Anyway, so just to wrap up the story, I think any Primarch where it makes even a remote amount of sense to bring them back, bring them back. Have them fight the final battle and have the Imperium lose. And have like all the Primarchs, a healthy chunk of the Primarchs perma-killed in the final battle. Have the Emperor killed in the final battle, and then do Warhammer 50,000, where basically the Emperor's dead and humanity is like they're cast into darkness. Warp travel is almost impossible, and you have a few remaining loyalist Primarchs essentially ruling over dying societies in little fiefdoms, and they're just praying that the Emperor's perpetual soul will reincarnate somewhere. And then that could be its own setting. And then Warhammer 60,000 is, of course, where the Emperor comes back.
Yeah. But
yeah. And then, sorry, there was one thing that you said that was really funny, though. So we were talking about like perpetuals and souls and Primarchs and stuff. Was there something that you said right before that?
Oh, about Dante. Dante and the Blood Angels.
Does Dante not feel better now that he's been Primarist?
I don't know. I'm pretty sure he's like, God, I just want to die. You know, the jokes are always like,
if he wanted to die and then he got Primarist and he survived that process, I hope it gives him some youthful zeal. I hope it gives him some pep in his step. Because if he still feels like a crotchety-year-old 70-year-old in an Astartes body and he's like, God, kill me. Like, dude, if he got Primarist after that, that is not cool. That would not be cool from a lore perspective.
Yeah, I mean, that's the joke that, you know, it's like, shit, now I got to do even more work. Same thing with the lion coming back. You know, he's an old man. He's like, what the hell is going on?
And he's like tired and shit. Yeah, I fucking love that. I love it. But all right, I'm gonna jump on with my buddy. I'm gonna wish him a happy birthday and then probably call it a night. But it was fun, and thanks for entertaining my chat for 2 hours. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Hopefully we can do this again, maybe in the near future, whenever.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to start doing like Warhammer streams where either I bullshit with one person or I do like a news breakdown where like I take like the top recent community stories of the past week and then start breaking it down. And also like maybe we'll just have some other people as a part of it. That way like they can interject their commentary into it. So yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
Well,
all right. I appreciate you, bud. You have a beautiful night.
You too, buddy.